Single dad's incredible act exposed after billionaire installs camera to monitor her son, you won't believe what happens next. Jake's heart raced as he watched the sunlight slip away, its fading rays casting long shadows across the porch where he and Tommy often played. A week had passed since Rebecca moved in. Just yesterday, another neighbor shared the gossip. "Did you hear? She's got cameras everywhere. Guess she doesn't trust anyone." Jake tensed at the thought. Was his parenting really questionable? Under scrutiny, he felt like a bug trapped under a glass, the weight of her gazes pinning him down. With every cup he brewed at the coffee shop, every package he delivered, he whispered affirmations into the air. Hard work was everything. Honesty was a treasure. Each day brought the same rush of exhaustion mixed with pride when he returned home to Tommy's giggles, but now a gnawing worry lurked just below the surface. He loved his kid fiercely, believing that real lessons came from life's struggles, not the white picket fence ideals that Rebecca seemed to represent. What if he was wrong? Rubbing the back of his neck, he remembered the bullying incident last week. Deciding to intervene when he saw Alex on the ground, Jake had stood up for the boy, teaching Tommy about empathy and courage. The community knew him as the single dad who cared, yet now he feared the quiet judgment that Rebecca might wield from her ivory tower. Would she twist that moment, distorting it into an example of poor parenting? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As rumors swirled, Jake felt the weight of every lighthearted chuckle from his son turn to a reminder of his looming dread. Would other parents whisper harsh truths about him behind his back? Anxiety crept in as he considered confronting Rebecca, but the thought churned his stomach. How could he risk Tommy's peace over his pride? The disunity in the neighborhood deepened. Families now exchanged glances saturated with suspicion. Jake was angry at himself for feeling vulnerable, for needing validation from those who once celebrated his fierce devotion. And yet, how could he respond when he felt his own ideals were being challenged? Would he choose to confront injustice or protect his son from turmoil? With Rebecca's oppressive presence tightening around him, Jake knew he had to act. If not for himself, then for Tommy. Every nerve screamed at him to stand tall, but uncertainty rooted him to the earth. As night closed in, enveloping the town in darkness, the very foundation of his beliefs began to wobble, unsettling Jake at his core. Would they discover that protecting Tommy sometimes meant bending the rules? If he didn't find a way, everything he'd taught Tommy and everything he believed in would hang in the balance, trembling on the edge. Jake's restlessness echoed through the nighttime silence as he lay awake, grappling with his swirling thoughts. The shadows in the room danced along the walls, merging with the chaos in his mind. He couldn't shake Rebecca's looming presence, her judgments suffocating him like a noose. The cameras, they seemed to watch his every move. How could he let that happen? What kind of father puts himself under someone else's scrutiny? Rising from his bed, he wandered into the kitchen where the clock ticked incessantly, reminding him of the day's burdens. Pouring a glass of water, he tried to focus on the task at hand. The more he contemplated his situation, the more he realized he couldn't let fear dictate his actions. Tommy needed a father who stood by his beliefs, not one who wilted in the face of challenges. But could he confront Rebecca without compromising the safety and happiness of his son? As the dawn crept in, painting the room in hues of orange and gold, Jake made a decision. That morning, he would reach out to Rebecca. Keeping emotions in check, he rehearsed what he would say, how he would approach her. Confrontation terrified him, but the desire to shield Tommy from misunderstanding loomed larger than his fear. At breakfast, Tommy was unusually quiet. Jake noticed the change, that shadow of uncertainty deepening in his son's eyes. They had faced challenges together, but this felt different. "Hey, buddy," Jake said, trying to inject some lightness. "How about we go feed the ducks after school today?" Tommy smiled faintly, but Jake could sense something was off. Raising his son to be strong and self-confident was paramount, yet he feared that the strain of judgment might be creeping under the door they locked at night. Time slipped away faster than Jake anticipated, and soon he found himself standing outside Rebecca's home, heart pounding against his chest. The neatly trimmed hedges, the well-kept flower beds, symbols of order and stability, contrasted sharply with the disarray of his thoughts. He could hear the murmur of voices from inside, an argument, perhaps. Gathering his courage, he knocked briskly on the door. The handling of the situation felt absurd. Did he really need to confront her to protect what he valued? As the door swung open, their eyes locked, and he swallowed hard, a parent's gaze that asked for clarity in murky waters. "Jake," Rebecca said, a hint of surprise in her tone, "what brings you here?" "I think we need to talk," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady, "about how we're raising the kids." The initial exchange of pleasantries turned into an exploration of boundaries and intentions, but Jake felt something shift. The conversation was about more than just their children. It was about how each of them viewed parenting itself. Each argument, every piece of advice, the more they spoke, the clearer it became. They stood on opposite sides of an invisible chasm. It was the recognition that Rebecca's ideals clashed with his own, and that stood to impact both their children. In that moment of tension, Jake uncovered an unexpected resolve within him. The notion of compromise had never appealed, but the thought that maybe, just maybe, he could find common ground sparked inside him. As the sun rose higher, illuminating their differences, Jake realized this wasn't simply about Rebecca's cameras. It was about the essence of parenthood itself. Did he cling to his ideals fiercely enough to guide them towards resolution, or would he just stand by? Stepping fully into this arena felt monumental. "Maybe there's a way," he said, voice firm, "if we talk honestly." Little did he know that the exchange would be a mere prelude to an even fiercer storm brewing, one that would test the very core of what it meant to be a father. Would he be able to rise to the occasion, or would outside forces fracture everything he had built? The atmosphere shifted as Jake and Rebecca plunged deeper into the complexities of their conversation. The chasm between them felt vast, but there was a flicker of hope as Jake began to articulate his feelings, his frustrations with Rebecca's invasive parenting methods, and his commitment to nurturing Tommy's independence. "Look," he said, the urgency pushing him forward, "you think you're protecting the kids, but all that surveillance, it suffocates them. It'll teach them to hide rather than trust." Rebecca crossed her arms defiantly. "And what do you propose? That we just leave them to fend for themselves? You can't be naive, Jake. We live in a dangerous world." The contrast in their approaches was palpable, and Jake felt an overwhelming weight settle upon his shoulders. A part of him wanted to veer off into familiar territory, taking the path of anger or defensiveness, but he chose to lean into vulnerability. This time, he aimed for connection rather than conflict. "Maybe you're right about the dangers," he replied, taking a breath to center himself. "But think about Tommy. He needs to believe he can navigate life, explore it without fear. He can't do that when every move he makes is monitored." Rebecca's brows furrowed, the tension in her features easing slightly. "I want to protect him while also allowing him to grow. It's a balancing act, Jake." Jake nodded, sensing that they were reaching a crucial plateau in their discussion. "Then let's create that balance together. Maybe we can come up with guidelines that allow for some freedom, but still keep communication open between us." "Heart pounding,"
He realized he was not merely advocating for Tommy's welfare, but was also grappling with his own wants for his life as a father. In that moment, Jake saw pieces of the man he was becoming, a mediator, a collaborator, an ally reaching for a common goal. Yet, the struggle was palpable, especially as he remembered the cameras lurking in Rebecca's home, a physical embodiment of her doubts about him as a parent. A chill ran through him at the thought of how those judgments helped stoke the fires of his insecurity. Would this dialogue shift Rebecca's perspective, or would she cling to her methods, to her need for control? As the conversation began to ebb, they both sat quietly, acknowledging the unspoken truths that lingered in the air. This wouldn't be a one-time fix, it would be an ongoing dialogue. Jake was beginning to understand finding common ground was less about winning arguments and more about fostering understanding. "Let's check in regularly," he suggested cautiously, his vulnerability bleeding into the proposition. "And not just about the kids. Let's share where we're at. It might just help us raise them better." Rebecca met his gaze, weighing his offer. "I can agree to that, but I need to feel secure in how you'll approach parenting Tommy. It can't be just words." Jake braced himself. "I'm willing to show you, prove to you that I can be the father Tommy needs." Almost imperceptibly, Jake sensed a shift in the atmosphere, one he hadn't expected. The cameras still loomed, but perhaps, just perhaps, Rebecca was beginning to see a path that didn't revolve around surveillance. As he left Rebecca's house, a seed of courage burgeoned within him. He felt a new direction. Though he had yet to conquer doubts about the scrutiny he lived with, there was a tangible will to persist and connect. That evening, as he prepared dinner with Tommy, Jake's heart underlined each movement, a symphony of anticipation mixed with uncertainty. Preparing to nurture his son's aspirations became a self-reflective journey. Tommy, with brimming excitement, shared stories from school. Yet there were moments when Jake saw shadows of unease cloud his son's joy. It was a reminder of the work lying ahead. That night, once Tommy was tucked in bed, Jake sat alone at the kitchen table, replaying the day in his mind. The urge to secure a stable environment for his son conflicted sharply with the need to grapple with external pressures. As he turned to the window, looking out into the dark, he knew tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But with every struggle, with each decision made, he sensed another layer of himself was being forged. Yet the unease remained. How would Rebecca respond to his attempts to redefine their roles? What would happen if the tension escalated rather than ease? With resolve knitting through him, he braced for whatever storm lay ahead. "What's next?" he whispered to himself, the weight of his journey pressing on his chest as the night enveloped him in uncertainty. The morning sun peered through the curtains, casting streaks of light on Jake's weary face. He had barely slept, thoughts of yesterday's conversation racing through his mind. His resolve to connect deeply with Tommy and navigate his relationship with Rebecca felt daunting, like a labyrinth with no clear end. Each twist and turn brought a new complication, and the stakes felt increasingly high. Today was going to be different. He didn't just want to be a father who reacted to situations. He wanted to be proactive. He pulled on a well-worn t-shirt and jeans, the fabric a tangible reminder of his determination to strip away the layers of uncertainty that surrounded him. With every moment, he desired to grow into the role Tommy needed, not just a caretaker, but a guide, an advocate for his independence. Jake had gathered a handful of ideas during the sleepless hours. He wanted to set up activities that encouraged Tommy to express himself without any external judgment. He grabbed a notebook from the countertop, jotting down a list of possible outings the two could enjoy together. Hikes, trips to the science museum, a weekend of camping. Each suggestion lit a small fire of hope in his chest, a flicker that might help Tommy feel more secure and understood. As he made his plan, a nagging thought crept into his mind. How would Rebecca react to this? She had always been methodical about every part of their lives, and Jake felt an anxiety grip him when he considered how fiercely she might oppose his ideas. Would she perceive his efforts as an affront to her authority? Tommy bounded down the stairs, his spirit unyielded by the previous day's intensity. "Dad, what are we doing today?" he asked, his eyes alight with expectation. Jake smiled, hiding his trepidation. "How about we go on an adventure? I have some fun ideas I think you'll love." Tommy grinned and leaned in closer, eager to hear more. This was Jake's chance to foster enthusiasm, to show Tommy that exploration and creativity were vital parts of growing up. A quick text to Rebecca felt like a looming shadow. Jake hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Should he seek her approval? The reality was that her scrutiny remained a constant overhang, storm clouds threatening his progress. But Jake also realized he needed to stand firm, to forge a direction independent of her watchful eye. He decided to text Rebecca, laying out his plans for the day, while clearly stating that he wanted to focus on Tommy's development. The response, when it came, was less than encouraging. "Your ideas sound good, but I still need to know where you are at all times. Tommy shouldn't be out of touch with reality." Jake felt the chill of rejection, a familiar sting sent coursing through his resolve. But beneath it lurked a simmering determination. He would approach Tommy's experience differently, regardless of Rebecca's anxiety-induced parameters. "Dad, should we get started? I want to see the nature trail," Tommy insisted, his voice breaking Jake's thoughts. "Yes, let's go!" Jake exclaimed, exhilaration finally breaking through the tension in his chest. The essence of this day was about building trust and exploring together, and that mattered far more than the judgments forming in the background. In the car, as they cruised towards the trail, Jake felt a knot of tension ease just slightly. Conversations flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and shared stories. For that fleeting moment, Jake was acutely aware of how the bond with Tommy deepened when free from surveillance. Yet the last-minute message from Rebecca haunted Jake even as they trekked into the woods. Trust was fragile, shaped by actions and intentions more than words. Would his efforts be perceived as rebellious or constructive? When they reached the trail, a formidable canopy of trees lined their path, the sunlight filtering through with an almost regal glow. Jake took a deep breath. Today was more than just a parent-son outing. It was an opportunity to redefine their relationship, to shake off the tether of Rebecca's controlling instincts. With every step he took alongside Tommy, Jake felt the ground beneath him shifting. Perhaps, just maybe, he was beginning to crack the surface of the man he wanted to be, a father capable of not only nurturing but empowering his child in a world that often seemed threatening. Yet as the familiar sense of unease pricked his mind again, so too did the harsh reality loom. How would he confront Rebecca if and when she challenged him about this newfound direction? With the weight of that looming question, Jake pressed forward, acknowledging the uncertainty that still awaited him. The adventure was just beginning. But in the back of his mind, a question lingered like a half-formed cloud. When would the storm break? The trail they walked seemed endless, each twist revealing another stunning view of nature's artistry. Tommy darted ahead, an uncanny blend of excitement and boundless energy. The simple joy of being outside contributed to a mental shift within Jake. Nature was gradually unraveling the tightness in his chest, though the thought of Rebecca's skepticism lurked in the shadows. "Dad, did you know that trees can talk?" Tommy exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. "They can communicate with each other through their roots." Jake chuckled, impressed with his son's burgeoning curiosity. "I read something similar. They share nutrients and can warn each other about danger, just like us," he replied, wishing to encourage Tommy's fascination with the world. Despite everything swirling in his mind, moments like these were reminders of the bond they were fostering. But Jake's own thoughts twisted back again towards the implications of Rebecca's control. Did the sense of freedom they were experiencing on this trail come with a price? Jake contemplated the trust he and Tommy were cultivating, yet he also weighed it against his obligations to Rebecca. Would she understand these precious moments as valuable for Tommy's growth, or would she see them as a challenge to her authority? As they reached a clearing, the sun bathed the open space in warmth, illuminating their surroundings. Jake took a seat on a fallen log, watching Tommy explore the area, picking up rocks and marveling at the insects scurrying by. It was a tableau of childhood bliss, a stark contrast to his internal battle. Each laugh from Tommy rang true and full, and with each moment, Jake began to realize how much he had denied himself as a father, caught in the tumult of their chaotic family life. The thought jolted him. What if he invested in this growth, not only for Tommy, but for himself? The idea flared bright. Improving his parenting style meant engaging more authentically with his own desires and ambition, breaking free from Rebecca's grasp. "Do you want to build a fort?" Jake suggested, surprising himself with how easily the idea flowed. Tommy's eyes lit up, and he immediately nodded, energized by the prospect of creating something tangible. As they began gathering sticks and leaves, laughter and playful banter filled the air. The act of creating was rejuvenating for Jake. Each branch he stacked seemed to bolster his confidence. "Dad, this is going to be the coolest fort ever!" Tommy exclaimed, punctuating his excitement with wild gestures. For the first time that day, Jake felt connected, not just to Tommy, but to a deeper understanding of himself. With each interaction, he was beginning to embrace more than just the title of father. He was also someone who could discover joy in building something meaningful. Yet, as they fortified their structure, Jake felt a nagging thought rear its head. Could he sustain this momentum when he returned home? Would the weight of Rebecca's demands suffocate the empowerment he was reclaiming today? Suddenly, the familiar sound of a notification from his phone cut through the exhilaration. With a sinking feeling, he glanced at the screen. It was a message from Rebecca. "Did you make it to the trail? Where are you exactly?" An unsettling calm washed over him. He understood this was more than just a check-in. It sounded like a clear challenge to his autonomy. His pulse quickened, anxiety gnawing at the edges of his tranquility. As he glanced back at Tommy, lost in the magic of their creation, Jake was torn. Did he reply immediately, seeking to maintain peace, or did he take a stand, asserting his right to parent freely? Today had offered a glimpse into the father he could be, confident, nurturing, independent. But how could he preserve that sense of self in the storm that beckoned? The sun continued its descent, and in that quiet forest, surrounded by walls of leaves and laughter, Jake faced a defining moment. The decision that could either solidify his new direction or pull him back into the constraints of his old life. With a deep breath, he realized the storm was approaching, but was also, paradoxically, an opportunity for clarity. The moment to find his true voice was upon him, and for this he would need to prepare. What awaited him at home would either challenge his resolve or spur him on to finally define his role as a father. As the darkness encroached on the trail, a thought struck him. The time had come to face not only Rebecca, but the parts of himself he had yet to confront. Jake stood still on the trail, the weight of the decision pressing down on him with the intensity of the cooling evening air. Tommy was busy arranging their half-finished fort, the joyful sounds of his laughter ringing like distant chimes. Each laugh vibrated openly against the dense backdrop of trees, yet inside Jake, silence brewed, a deafening tension between autonomy and obligation. He glanced at the message on his phone again, breath hitching at the thought of a looming confrontation with Rebecca. Though he had basked in the warmth of the sun and the carefree energy of their time in the forest, the chill of reality crept in, reminding him that their world was still rife with complications. Would responding to Rebecca mean surrendering his newfound connection with Tommy? Or could he assert himself without wrecking the fragile peace that enveloped them right now? His thoughts spiraled back to the core of his discontent. For years, Jake had played the role of the compliant spouse, dancing around Rebecca's expectations, often sacrificing his own sentiments in the process. That discontent thrived in the silence, a quiet rebellion simmering beneath the surface. "Dad, come help me with this," Tommy called out, gesturing animatedly toward a wobbly ceiling of their makeshift fort. Jake felt an instinctual pull, a desire to step into the moment fully, to nurture not just Tommy's creativity, but his own emerging confidence as well. He didn't want to oscillate back into the shadows of uncertainty. He wanted to build something resilient, both for Tommy and for himself. Rising from the log, he drew in a full breath of earthy air. The vibrant green surrounding them soothed his fraught thoughts, providing clarity amidst the chaos. As he stepped closer to his son, an idea struck him with a fierce potency. Why couldn't he communicate his boundaries to Rebecca with the same vigor he showed here with Tommy? Why couldn't he approach that conversation with the heart of the supportive father he was becoming? The fort required reinforcement, and as Jake joined Tommy in affixing branches with more care than ever, he realized building was not merely about structure. It reflected resilience and trust. This was how he could approach his confrontation with Rebecca, by fortifying his own sense of self. "Tommy, do you think our fort can stand up to a storm?" Jake asked, shaping the moment into a lesson about strength and perseverance. "Yeah, but only if we keep working together," Tommy replied, his face alight with belief that made Jake's heart swell. The answer echoed deeper than the child's enthusiasm. It was symbolic of the partnership he dreamed of building with Rebecca, a union based on mutual respect and understanding. "So, let's make sure it's strong, just like us." Jake felt the resolve in his voice resonate, not just his determination to empower his son, but a subtle pledge to himself. He would not go back. As they toiled together, Jake realized he could approach the homecoming not merely as a man struggling for autonomy, but as a father willing to advocate for his vision of parenting, a harmonious blend of love, respect, and assertiveness. Yet even with this clarity, dread slithered back into his mind, the inevitable tension at home. Jake could visualize the confrontation with Rebecca, the possible fallout echoing loudly in his conscience. That storm would clash against the calm he found today, forcing him to reckon with who was truly in charge of his narrative. With darkness beginning to blanket the land, they paused to admire their work. The fort stood proudly, adorned with leaves and memories. Jake couldn't help but feel that it was a testament to their day, a symbol of connection that could not easily be dismantled. As they stepped away slowly, Jake's phone buzzed again, a reminder of reality waiting to intrude. This notification felt like the start of a critical chapter that could either enhance or dismantle his efforts at familial healing. "It's time to head back," he said, hoping the anticipation wouldn't extinguish the light he'd found today. But as he glanced at the screen, he felt a surge of resolve. No more running. It was time to face Rebecca with all the lessons he had learned, all the changes he was beginning to embrace. This was not just about the words he would say. It was about the emotional fortification within him, the new foundation he was ready to stand on. Jake took a breath, unified with purpose, as he and Tommy walked back down the trail. What kind of conversation awaited him when they reached home? Would the walls he had built hold up against the storm that Rebecca might unleash? The trek back to the car felt paradoxically both swift and drawn out. With each step, Jake felt the forest slowly surrendering its vibrant life to creeping shadows. His mind wandered through the labyrinth of possibilities awaiting him at home, each turn presenting a different version of reality: the fiery confrontation, the calm negotiation, the silent acceptance of his newfound boundaries. The air grew colder, and Jake shivered slightly, not just from the temperature drop, but from the chill of confronting the unknown. Tommy skipped ahead, seemingly unbothered by the impending tension. Jake couldn't help but admire the ease with which his son navigated the world. Each jubilant bounce revived a sense of innocence that Jake found himself yearning to protect. "How do you feel about our fort?" Jake asked, wanting to turn the conversation away from the ominous homecoming. Tommy turned back with an oversized grin. "I think it's the best one ever. We might even make it into a castle next time." A soft laugh escaped Jake's lips, and for a brief moment the weight of the future lifted. "A castle, huh? I'm sure knights will want to come and visit." "Yes, with dragons too!" Tommy's imagination soared, and Jake reveled in the bright light of his son's excitement. It was foreign, yet comforting, a reminder of what he was fighting to preserve. But as they reached the car, Jake felt the warmth of that moment recede like the sunlight behind the hills. What awaited him inside his home? That uncertainty churned in his stomach like a storm ready to crash. Sitting behind the wheel, he caught a glimpse of Tommy idly twisting a seatbelt into shapes. The innocence he saw in his son ignited a new flame of resolve. He didn't want to go back to the soft-spoken man who let his feelings remain stifled under a tidal wave of expectation. "No more hiding," he whispered to himself. As they drove in silence, Jake contemplated his strategy. How could he broach the subject without igniting a firestorm? A conversation built on mutual respect was his hope, yet potential for chaos loomed in every corner of his mind. Returning home felt different. The familiar sights, the porch light glowing, the summer flowers wilting ever so slightly, were suddenly charged with electricity that made Jake's heart race. He plastered a smile on his face for Tommy, pushing away the darker thoughts. "Ready for your big surprise?" he asked, grabbing the door handle. "Yeah, I bet it's pizza," Tommy declared, hopping in place. And for a fleeting moment, Jake felt buoyed by his son's enthusiasm. Once inside, reality smacked him across the face like a bitter gust of wind. The house seemed still, yet behind the surface was an undercurrent of tension. Rebecca's presence felt like a storm cloud ready to unleash. After a quick exchange about dinner, Jake found himself perched at the kitchen table, a place they often used for family discussions. He realized he wasn't merely sitting down for a meal, he was preparing for a confrontation. He could already feel the discord simmering in the air. As Tommy scampered to wash his hands, the kitchen closed in around Jake. Rebecca's demeanor was calm yet distant, her furrowed brow suggesting thoughtful deliberation. A quiet dread ensued as the sparking realization hit him, how crucial this moment was becoming. Jake took a deep breath, leaning into the feeling of impending transformation. "Can we talk?" he found his voice. "About what?" Rebecca replied, her tone sharp but curious. The words hung between them like invisible chains waiting to bind or liberate. Jake's heart thundered against his ribcage as he steadied his thoughts. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of every experience from the forest, every lesson on building resilience. He was no longer just Jake. He was a father willing to fight for his vision of what family meant. But as he opened his mouth to begin, a tentative thought crossed his mind. Was he ready for the ramifications of his newfound assertiveness? He had the fort inside him now, and he was about to test its strength. The next words could fortify or dismantle everything he had dared to build. "Rebecca, I think it's time we discuss some boundaries," he started, but uncertainty creeped back in as he spoke. Would this lead to growth or a painful collapse? Outside, an ominous storm began to brew, and inside, Jake readied himself for the tempestuous conversation that lay ahead. Would his voice be enough to weather the coming storm? Jake's breath hitched as he leaned back in his chair, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Rebecca's eyes, fixed on him like a hawk's, betrayed nothing. In that suspended moment, Jake's resolve flickered like a candle in a windstorm. Was he prepared for her response? The uncertainty gnawed at his insides, but pushed him further into his resolve. "Boundaries?" she echoed, her voice a mixture of incredulity and challenge. "Jake, who do you think you are?" The harshness stung more than he expected. He saw the boundaries of their relationship plastered on the walls, built over years of unspoken grievances and muffled arguments. Yet he took a moment, gathering his thoughts, realizing that the moment required him to step boldly into uncharted territory. "Who I am," he said, finding the steadiness in his voice, "is someone who wants to be a better father. And being a better father means being honest with you about what I need." His heart raced, but he held her gaze, refusing to let the fear swallow him whole. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "You think drawing lines will fix the issues we have? That's naive, Jake." Her dismissal struck a nerve. Wasn't that how he had felt for so long? Naive to believe that one conversation could change anything? But confronting deep-rooted issues required more than naivety. It demanded strength. "I understand that it's a process," he replied, each word a calculated step toward clarity. "But it has to start somewhere. We can't keep dancing around everything." His hands clenched on the table, a physical manifestation of his desire to anchor himself in this turbulent environment. "I'm the one carrying the burden here," she countered, her voice rising. "While you've been off your merry way hiking and playing make-believe with Tommy, I've been sustaining this family. Who do you think you're fooling?" That accusation, sharp and true, ricocheted around the kitchen, piercing through his carefully crafted resolve. He had to confront the reality that he had been retreating, emotionally and physically. "And where does that leave us, Rebecca?" he pressed, a tremor escaping his tone. A battle of wills ignited across the table. Jake felt the remnants of guilt crawl through him as they fought for control, or perhaps the right to be heard. This was not only about boundaries, but also about freedom. Freedom from silent resentment and the need for validation. "You have no idea how hard this has been for me," she said, temper softening, though still guarded. "Maybe not, but I want to understand," Jake responded, the conviction in his voice firming up. "We can't move forward until both our perspectives are on the table. I'm not asking for the impossible, I just want a partnership." His sincerity hung in the balance between them, and for the first time, some of the tension in Rebecca's shoulders seemed to ease. He saw the flicker of something familiar in her eyes, a hope buried beneath layers of frustration and fatigue. "For what it's worth," she said hesitantly, "I didn't realize how much I needed that kind of acknowledgement." Jake exhaled, relief filtering through the heavy air as he felt it chink in her armor. This was hope, but the journey was far from over. Just as Jake began to think they might reach a semblance of understanding, the distinct ring of his phone shattered the moment of fragile progress. His heart sank as he glanced at the screen, an unknown number. The intrusion felt weighty. He forced himself to pick it up, fighting the instinct to ignore the call. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was urgent, distant yet alarming. "Is this Jake? We need to talk. It's about Tommy." Ice coursed through him. An unexpected rush of adrenaline replaced the delicate connection he had just forged with Rebecca. The ground shifted beneath him again, and he prepared himself for an impending roller coaster of another kind. What about Tommy? As he listened, something churned within him, a familiar dread brewing anew. Whatever lay ahead felt more daunting than anything he had faced thus far. Would this unravel everything he had just attempted to build? Jake pinched the bridge of his nose, rattled by the voice on the other end. "What do you mean something is wrong?" he asked, panic threading through his words. As the speaker detailed the situation, each word cut like a knife, revealing a painful fracture, the type that could potentially fracture their family further with repercussions he hadn't anticipated. He lowered his voice, wanting to shield Rebecca from the storm brewing inside him. "I'll be right there." He hung up, the finality of the action solidifying the earlier confrontation's ambiguity. Wasn't he just beginning to confront his own conflicts? Now his son is at risk, not just physically, but emotionally as well. This was no mere infraction. It could redefine their perception of safety and trust. With a quick glance toward Rebecca, he saw the concern spread across her face. She sensed something was awry, the tension building again. He couldn't afford to show weakness, not now, not when everything felt precarious. "I need to go," he said, determination edging his voice. "There's a problem with Tommy." "Jake, what's going on?" Her question was firm, but the underlying panic was unmistakable. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." He skirted the response, unwilling to drag her emotions further into the fray. He hated that he was burying the mounting tension beneath layers of urgency, but it felt necessary. A poor choice, but a choice nonetheless. As he stepped outside, the crisp air hit him like a slap. The world had shifted. Each breath felt more significant now that it bore the weight of parental responsibility. His professional life had always revolved around achieving results, maneuvering through diverse challenges to reach goals. This was different, a personal dilemma morphing into a crisis of character. The drive to Tommy's location was blurring. Mental images of past interactions with his son flickered like an old film. Happy moments draped in ease and laughter contrasted starkly against the reality of unexplained trouble lurking just around the corner. Every minute on the road was heavy. How could he face Tommy and be the father he needed to be when the ground beneath him felt unsteady? He finally arrived. The site, a dimly lit arcade, bore an air of mischief, and adult supervision seemed sparse. It wasn't just about boredom anymore. It felt like this was a cold battlefield of children's innocence. As he entered, the sound of laughter and competition momentarily heightened his resolve. But it was the absence of his son that gnawed at him. His heart raced as he made his way to the attendant. "Where's my son?" he demanded, the desperation in his voice morphing to anger. "Tommy? He was with a group, but they had to step outside. I think something happened." The attendant's words were lost beneath the cacophony of games. But Jake didn't wait for the follow-up. He surged towards the exit, his determination palpable. All his thoughts shifted to protecting Tommy. Didn't he promise to safeguard not only his son's physical safety, but also to foster an emotional sanctuary? His past failures rippled through him. Had he truly been present for Tommy? The urgency of the phone call had been a wake-up call, a reminder that he was not living up to the standards he set for himself as a father. He hadn't been vigilant. He had been running in circles. Outside, the air was thick. The group of kids stood huddled together, their attention fixed in one direction. Jake's heart sunk when he spotted Tommy, his face clouded with confusion and fear. Suddenly, a wave of realization crashed into him. This wasn't merely about scattered boundaries in his relationship with Rebecca, but about redefining what it meant to be a committed father. He approached, each step measured, fear melding with resolve. "Tommy!" he called out. His son's gaze snapped up, and in that instant, Jake understood. He had a critical choice to make. Would he retreat into uncertainty, or confront both the chaos of the external world and the growing chasm between him and Rebecca? Jake squared his shoulders, ready to bridge the distance, to reclaim his role against the turbulence befalling his family. The time had come to act, but what revelation awaited him once he confronted both his son's fears and his own buried uncertainties? He inhaled deeply, prepared for the impending confrontation, whatever it might reveal. Jake stood on the pavement, his heart pounding as he approached the cluster of children that surrounded Tommy. The moment felt monumental. The apprehensions swirling around him conspired to drown out any sense of clarity. Would he be a lighthouse, guiding his son through a storm? Or would he falter, lost in the very turbulence he had promised to confront. "Tommy," he called again, pushing through the anxiety that gripped his throat like a vice. Instinctively, he combed through the group, eyes finding his son's. There they were, Tommy's eyes, a mix of confusion and defiance, locked onto him with the intensity that pierced through all distractions. A cacophony of chatter and laughter receded into a dull hum. Other kids had turned their attention to the impending confrontation, curiosity vibrating through them like a ripple on water. But Jake focused solely on Tommy. The maze of noise dissolved, replaced by the thundering cadence of Jake's heart echoing in his ears, urging him to reach out in this moment. As he reached his son, Jake knelt to be eye level with Tommy, sorrow and resolve converging in his expression. "What happened?" he asked, gently, concerned about the weight of silence hanging around them like a dark cloud. Before Tommy could reply, another child, a few steps back, piped up. They were just playing, but some kids were teasing him because he threw the basketball too hard and hit one of them. There was an assertiveness in this child's tone, but Jake could see now how uncertainty had set in among the kids. Tommy's face mirrored their discontent. Jake's protective instincts surged, and he fought the urge to lecture or shift the blame. "Tommy, is that true?" he asked, directing his question with the gentleness the moment demanded. Tommy hesitated, his voice cracking slightly. "They said I wasn't good enough, and I got mad, but I didn't mean to hurt anyone." In that vulnerable admission, Jake caught a glimpse of the emotional landscape that had burdened his son, fragile self-esteem overshadowed by momentary frustration. Jake felt something inside him shift. It wasn't merely about Tommy's social interactions, but a manifestation of everything they had been navigating. The need for understanding, the inclination to express oneself without fear of judgment. "You know what?" Jake said, his voice steady but soft. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we recognize how they affect others. You know that already. Remember when we talked about being kind even when we are upset?" Tommy nodded slowly, a spark of recognition lighting up his eyes. Jake's gaze softened further. "It's okay to feel frustrated, but let's figure out how you can turn that into something positive. What's important is how we respond. Can you give me a moment to speak with you alone?" Tommy glanced at his peers, hesitation coloring his features. Jake nodded, seeing the flicker of uncertainty, and motioned for him to step away a few feet, where they could find a space free from watchful eyes. A sense of gratification swelled within him. The little boy still had faith in his father during this moment of distress. As they moved away, Jake felt the weight of parental responsibility settle like armor upon his shoulders. "Do you see those kids over there?" he asked, gesturing toward the group. "They may not realize it just yet, but every word matters. You can change the narrative. How can we do that together?" Tommy stared at the ground, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I just don't want them to think I'm weak," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "And you're not weak. Strength comes not only from physical prowess, but from showing character. You can show them you're a good friend, even when things get tough. How do you feel about talking it out, apologizing if necessary?" Something in Tommy's demeanor shifted, hopefulness infused with courage. "Yeah, I can do that. But what if they don't listen?" "They will," Jake smiled, the undeniable warmth of fatherly pride surging through him. "But even if they don't, the important part is that you spoke your truth. You will show them and yourself that you can stand up for what's right." In that moment, Jake felt the bond crystallizing between them, fortified by vulnerability and strength. Their shared experience was becoming a profound lesson in navigating conflict. With newfound determination glowing in Tommy's eyes, they returned to the circle of kids. Jake remained by his side, ready to support his son through whatever interactions awaited. When Tommy approached the others, Jake witnessed the stability he had worked to create within their relationship manifest in action. It was a tangible transformation, a shared fortification that steadied both father and son. As Tommy spoke to the group, Jake noticed how the kids responded. Some murmured, and others offered expressions of understanding. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a glimpse into the lessons Jake sought to impart daily, an affirmation that Tommy could thrive in his environment. With the moment turning toward resolution, Jake felt the latent tension within him release. There was a dawning sense of victory, not simply to defend Tommy, but to witness him grow amid adversity. The emotional brushes with setbacks became avenues of strength, a lesson every parent yearns to impart. But this journey was also about Jake, his courage, their shared growth, the rhythms of connection established through shared experience. Later, standing outside while they prepared to leave, Jake encountered Rebecca. The complicated weave of their past hovered in the space between them. Yet in that moment, he perceived an invitation, a unifying opportunity to undertake this journey together. "Did you get to talk with him?" she asked, tentatively. "I did." Jake locked onto her gaze, bearing the remnants of their earlier confrontation. "He's struggling with the pressure, and I think he's beginning to understand he doesn't need to shoulder it alone." A flicker of comprehension passed through Rebecca's eyes. "I want him to feel supported too," she replied, the distance in her voice softening. "And that includes both of us, together," he affirmed, recalling the conversations they had begun earlier. This was an opportunity for collaboration. "Let's try to talk more openly," he continued, heart pounding with the significance of the moment. "If we're not a unified front, it's harder for him to navigate these challenges." Rebecca nodded, a tentative smile breaking through the clouds of unease. "I agree." As they moved past the scene of turbulence and uncertainty, Jake could feel the fragments of their hopelessness begin to merge into a spotlight, a chance for their family to be whole again. And this time, he would not retreat. He understood the necessity of rooting their family dynamics in mutual support. Walking toward the car, Jake felt the burdens of the day shift, feeling lighter with each measured step. The connection with Tommy had strengthened his foundation, and the recognition that he could impart these lessons with Rebecca reignited the hope that had become buried under uncertainty. This time, he was anchored. What awaited them would blend the complexities of parenting, but together they navigated their footing, rebuilding bonds with purpose. The storm at home was no longer a fracture, but a chosen collaboration, punctuating every second with the resolve of an accomplished father. As they headed home, Jake realized he was no longer simply chasing approval. He was leading the way with newfound strength, not just for himself, but for his family. He had accomplished not merely a reaction, but a transformation. Today marked the awakening of Jake, the father he had always aspired to be, with a commitment to guiding his son through the storms of life. Now, the journey could unfold, a path cleared for exploration, connection, and growth, truly rediscovering the resilience between them. The bond, once frayed and fragile, was now fortified, ready to weather whatever came next. And in that realization was a tangible thrill, a peace suffusing their hearts, a testament to the strength of the family they were rebuilding. But now it was time for you to act. You need to subscribe now to never miss out on the powerful journeys unfolding on this channel. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and inspire more transformation stories like Jake's. Comment down below your thoughts, reactions, and theories about his journey, and let's keep this conversation alive. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of personal growth and commitment because you understand the significance of those stories. Don't wait even one more second to share.